Welcome to Afrika Tuungane, United States of Africa. This is a flagship program under the Honorable Media Africa. And today, the 25th day of May 2025, we are coming to you live from Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya. Today is a historic day, a momentous day for Africa, because we will remember that today, 62 years ago, the Organization of African Unity, or what is today known as the African Union, was founded by the then newly independent leaders of Africa. 32 of them met in Addis Ababa today, 62 years ago, for the historic first conference of newly independent African states. Afrika Tuungane is on a mission to find solutions to 4 major intergenerational problems and challenges in Africa. 1, the challenge of African unity, which is also the greatest challenge for Africa and also the greatest dream for Africa, African unity. 2, the challenge of intra-African travel. 3, the challenge of intra-African trade. 4, the challenge of intra-African tourism. So today we will be talking about, or rather having a conversation about what is Africa's greatest challenge and greatest dream, the African unity. And we are going to be proposing a solution to the leaders of African Union at the level of the African Union Assembly of Heads of State and Government. Afrika Tuungane is proposing and petitioning the African Union Assembly of Heads of State and Government to unite Africans. How? Through one common African language. In this case, KISWAHILI language, which is an African language, to be a common language and a lingua franca for all Africans across the 55 states of Africa. The challenge and the dream of African unity did not begin today, and that is why I'm describing it as an intergenerational challenge and an intergenerational dream that remains to be realized. We will remember that on this day, 62 years ago, on May 25th, the 25th day of May 1963, when the 32 leaders of newly independent African states met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, for the historic first conference of newly independent African states, the challenge of a common language and a lingua franca, or rather, the need and urgency for a common language, one common language and lingua franca for Africa, was evident from some of the speeches that were made on that day in 1963. We will particularly remember His Excellency Hubert Maga, the first president and the founding father of Dahomey, or what is today known as Benin. We will also remember His Excellency, the first Prime Minister of Uganda, His Excellency Dr. Milton Obote. We will also remember His Excellency Francois Tombalbaye, the first president and founding father of the Republic of Chad. We will equally remember and His Excellency Habib Bourguiba, the founding father and first president of the Republic of Tunisia. These 4 African leaders, 62 years ago, were clearly in agreement that Africa needed a common language to unite all Africans. I will quote some of these leaders, the 4 leaders. I will quote some words from the speeches they made on that day, referring, or rather talking about the need for an African language to unite Africans as a common language. on the dire need and urgency for one African language to unite Africans as a common language, I will read quotes from these 4 African leaders, words spoken by these 4 African leaders in the historic first conference of independent African states on May 25, 1963. And let me begin with a quote from His Excellency Hubert Maga, the first president and founding president of the Republic of Benin. He said the following, and I quote, and remember this was on the 25th day of May 1963, exactly 62 years ago. This is what His Excellency Hubert Maga said in regard to the need for one language, an African language, to unite all Africans. He said the following, and I quote, "It seems obvious that the time has now come for Africans who have nearly all regained their liberty to jointly choose the future they wish for themselves. For there is no doubt that henceforth they feel themselves called to live together and no longer separated and heretofore by artificial barriers of languages, laws, and customs inherited from the foreigner." Those are the words of His Excellency Hubert Maga. It seems obvious that the time has now come for Africans who have nearly all regained their liberty to jointly choose the future they wish for themselves. For there is no doubt that henceforth they feel themselves called to live together and no longer separated and heretofore by artificial barriers of languages, laws, and customs inherited from the foreigner. Those are the words of His Excellency Hubert Maga, the first president and the founding father of the Republic of Benin, back then known as Dahomey, on May 25, 1963. We go on to the second quote by His Excellency Habib Bourguiba, the founding father and the first president of the Republic of Tunisia. This is what he said in regard to the need for one African language to unite all Africans. So I'll read his quote, and this is what he said. "Divisions, differences in languages inherited from the colonial era, inadequacy of communication systems, and sometimes misunderstandings have hardly furthered the progress of inter-African cooperation. In its principle and effects, that cooperation remains eminently desirable. We have to break down all divisions inherited from the colonial era. It must not be forgotten that for a very long time, Africa was a continent open to the world and closed to itself." Those are the words of His Excellency Habib Bourguiba, the founding father and first president of the Republic of Tunisia, talking about languages, specifically talking about languages inherited from the colonial era. Going on, I'll read the quote from the speech made by Uganda's first Prime Minister, His Excellency Dr. Milton Obote, in regard to the need for one common African language for all Africans. So this is what he said, and I quote, "Our revolution must succeed. I know that there are great difficulties which we must overcome in order to take a bold step forward. Several centuries of close contact with our ex-colonizers have left deep marks on us. Even in this conference, we can only communicate with one another with the help of former colonial powers' languages. What we have to decide at this conference is whether our manners and even our temperament will continue to be dominated by our long association with our ex-rulers. In respect to the need of African unity, the time for high-sounding words, slogans, cliches, and good intentions has come to an end. This is the time for concrete proposals and for action. Those are the words of His Excellency Dr. Milton Obote, the first Prime Minister of Uganda during the historic May 25th May of 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So this is what His Excellency Francois Tombalbaye, the first president of Chad, said in regard to the need for one common African language for all Africans on this day, 62 years. So this is what he said, and I quote, "It goes without saying that there are today many speculators hoping for the failure of our meeting. To that end, it gives them pleasure to draw attention to our present political, economic, and above all, linguistic differences. Their sole purpose is to maintain the present clearage of the African continent, and in this way to continue the savage exploitation of each of our peoples who, God knows, are so poor and so wanting. It is up to us then to understand the situation and foil any maneuvers liable to retard our continent's progress towards its complete liberation and towards its happiness. In reality, these maneuvers are in vain. They will last only for a certain time, for we have good reasons for believing in the possibility of achieving African unity. There's nothing unchangeable in the language barriers. It is merely a question of generations and of reforming educational programs." So those are the words of His Excellency Francois Tombalbaye, the founding father and first president of the Republic of Chad.